Creating Engagement in the Classroom, Understanding the Challenges of the Modern-Day Learning Environment
is written by Kevin Popovic and Ryan Vanshur.
Welcome to another webinar in our series, Creating Engagement in the Classroom. I'm Kevin Popovic, a lecturer at San Diego State University. Today we're really going to dive into the role smart devices play in the modern higher education classroom, but we're also going to consider the more traditional approach. In doing so, we hope to identify areas of overlap, potential crossover strategies, strengths and weaknesses of each, and more.
Absolutely. This is going to be a great discussion. I'm Ryan Vanshur, an undergraduate student here at San Diego State and co-author of the ebook with Kevin, Creating Engagement in the Classroom. And today our webinar is titled Social Learning, Understanding Classroom Facilitation. And we can't wait to share some of our research and expertise on this topic.
For today's webinar, we're going to take a look at what is front-end facilitation and, of course, what is back-end facilitation. We'll also look at what are the strengths and weaknesses of each, how are students influencing their learning with technology. We'll take a look, of course, at the professor's view and the student's view, as well as what does the current research say. And, of course, Ryan, at the very end, we always have questions and answers.
Absolutely.
So today's educators are responsible for more than just direct lectures. The content organization, the instructional design, the delivery structure for their lessons must be well planned and duly executed. New learning and research shows that educators should consider the multiple channels of communication that are available today. They also need to evaluate the tools, technologies, and curricula that will be needed in place to facilitate student discussions outside of the classroom.
Yep, and we do know that if these types of channels aren't provided by the educator, students can put these plans into motion themselves, and typically the instructor won't be getting an invitation to these conversations if that's the way that they get created, right? And so I know this is true because I've experienced this firsthand going through some of my lectures here at SDSU. And so typically the educator, should look to spearhead the creation of some of these online groups and communities so that they can interact with their students. And I've met many professors that use Twitter and a couple different social media tools in order to really facilitate this and control those conversations. Many professionals assert that the teacher has a duty to become, digitally literate to remain relevant in the classroom and also to, continue to connect with their students well into the future.
Well, frequently a conversation arises in our field, is using your smartphone to find information dishonest, or is it an efficient use of time and technology? So not sure where you stand on this issue. I think it's an important conversation to have. Teachers are charged with teaching, supplying and applying information, providing context, and building skills. If one of the goals of education is to prepare the student for real-world working environments, then teaching a student to use technology to solve problems and complete tasks is on the task list, right?
Yeah, and so my peers and obviously other students may look at this as a shortcut, right? All I have to do is search on my phone or my tablet for the answer, and often we'll get some reference or answer at a very generic level on the first page in order for us to figure out how to complete a task. We usually click on the first link that we find on the Google search results. Now the first answer may not be the right answer, right? But the experience and obviously the repetition, going through and searching for the correct information over time will teach us how to go out and do this. And so if we're constantly utilizing this as a means of gathering information, we're able to kind of tailor the methods that work best for us and that allow us to produce, more consistently positive results. But again, we have to kind of fail forward and learn how to do this ourselves.
Well, when describing front-end classroom facilitation, we're really talking about our strategies that are traditionally instructor-dominated. The teacher has been hired to teach and to perform as they were instructed during their own education, right? They know how to create a syllabus, develop course materials, and develop a program that fits the defined class parameters, i.e. 3 days a week for 50 minutes or for 16 weeks. And some homework, a couple of well-placed tests, and presto, you have a 3-credit semester course. In this method, teachers often utilize learning management systems, or LMSs, such as Blackboard. The addition of an LMS to a classroom provides online access to the class materials as well as a schedule of assignments. An LMS also offers the ability to test and to turn in assignments online and a real report on the grades for the class pending a timely submission from the teacher. So supplementing this world of online enhancement, ebooks and publisher adaptive learning programs provide the materials and references for the class in a digital format with some of the audio tracks or linked resources which are updated automatically as the publisher supplies them. Other features may include interactivity, feedback, even support.
And then, of course, there's cases where, when learning is no longer a one-way street dictated solely by the professor, especially as the classrooms, grow in size. The back-end facilitation you mentioned, which is more, a reference to those strategies and tools that are arranged by the students in order to supplement and facilitate their learning, when there's gaps inside the classroom itself. And these are more newer, student-dominated strategies that are rising in popularity. And also, there's a strong relationship to the technologies that are now becoming more accessible that enable them. Today, I know the use of social media and chat apps in particular is really popular with students because it's instant real-time communication, and you can use this to organize outside of that lecture hour where you don't typically have the chance to interact. I've seen multiple private Facebook groups that allow us to quickly and easily share our materials, share study guides, due dates, catch up on missed classes. You can really just make a quick post to your Facebook group, and other members of the class will see it. It pops up right on their phones. You get responses real quick, much faster than you can get a response from your professor in most cases. And these are accessible anywhere, since Facebook is on your computer, tablet, or laptop. And so the invention and evolution of these cloud-based services like Google Docs and Dropbox and these things that function similarly. Students can now, assemble in one place, dump all their materials in one place. They can comment it and share it with each other as needed. And the information is even, then available offline, when they're not in the classroom or, when they're unplugged from the campus. And so students are able to access all this anywhere even when the Wi-Fi connection is not available. And so I just think having everything, centralized and taking advantage of the tools that the students are already using and leveraging them for the classroom. You won't be able to share and discuss content in real time, aside from doing the PDF and study guides or however those are going to be managed. But if there's definitely a distinct advantage for today's students when, the infrastructure of the classroom and the distribution of information is made a lot more easy and accessible to them.
Well, in the past, the richer, deeper conversations took place in the classroom, while e-learning from a distance struggled to produce the same level of engagement. Now, whether it was a digital divide or a lack of bandwidth, the online experience was never able to bring the same level of interaction as the classroom experience. When a student missed a class with a great lecture, they missed a vital piece of the learning puzzle. Now, this is because face-to-face offers the educators a visual, auditory, and contextual channel of communication to the students, as well as a means to gather and respond to student feedback, based if it has been provided. Now, today technology allows the replication of face-to-face with webcams, video chat, text-based SMS sharing as additional channels of communication, and audience response tools. Now, these, however, require educators to learn a new pedagogical environment and strategy that really works with the courseware and teaching style. So mobile pedagogy is not a replacement for the teacher leading in the classroom by any means, right? It's rather it serves as a supplement to traditional lectures that extend the times for the learning environment past normal class times, right? From a synchronous experience to an asynchronous experience. And many, like me, believe this is for the better.
And it can also be argued that more learning is taking place after the lecture than during, especially in the larger lectures that are limited to that one-way presentation format where you're covering significant amounts of content in relatively short periods of time. And so there's multiple occasions where I've experienced, teaching myself the textbook, so to speak, as a result of not being able to necessarily adapt to the stadium seating and massive learning environments. And what really saved me was access to my peers through those alternative modes of communication that we had just mentioned. The lack of opportunities for student expression in a live lecture, we were able to supplement with our own preferred methods in the form of those social chats where we could express different ideas to each other. And so once the professor's pedagogy is not equipped to facilitate that student engagement, we always gravitate towards what we think is familiar, right? And this is our own mobile-based, what I would call maybe a virtual extension of the classroom. And when we asked another student who we had an in-depth conversation with, we mentioned him last webinar, was Derek. We asked him about his experience with student-led learning initiatives and how he's experienced those. He had mentioned he'd worked with other students on projects and live chat rooms and in library study groups. And social media groups are one of the useful ways for planning study groups and staying on top of class updates. And Derek had mentioned in the end, it really takes the leadership of the outgoing students. And even sometimes he mentioned professors that are creating those type of welcoming atmospheres to ensure that nobody in that class is left out. Mm-hmm. So A professor who masters mobile-based pedagogy can certainly enhance the sense of learning community among his students by encouraging them to use the alternative learning environments that are being set up. And today, mobile learning is allowing for quick, reliable exchanges of information, valuable communication outside of class time, and these tools are really offering ways to engage in that peer-supported learning. That's really a new phenomenon in these classrooms, while at the same time having the advantage of not requiring them to be limited to that specific time or location that the class meets.
Let's talk about what works. First up in the category of effective solutions are educator-led front channels. SDSU Associate Professor of History, Dr. Elizabeth Ann Pullen, offers one of the best localized examples of facilitating and encouraging back-channel learning in her classes. A recent publication of hers discusses the value of this method, detailing how she applies it to generate the best learning outcomes from her students in her 300-plus student world history course. She says, although I had heard of a concept called back-channel learning and was eager to open that back channel to transform the one-way nature of conversations into a bi- or even multi-directional learning environment, I had not yet settled upon a technology that could facilitate the interactivity, responsiveness, and engagement for which I yearned, she said. Primarily using Twitter to accomplish her goals, however, she unveiled some unique outcomes. While Twitter was used during class sessions or midday, as I had hoped, Twitter was also used by students and me later in the day after classes to digest what had happened in class, and even later into the evening during television prime time, or when one would almost never imagine student engagement with course materials. She mentioned her case study linked above. Now, while this approach may not have always provided the solution needed for a particular classroom, Dr. Pollard's methods have shown merit and should be considered moving forward.
And then we have on the other side of the coin, obviously, we talk the student-led back channels. And so this goes back again to at the start of every semester. There's typically a student in class who copies the email list from whichever LMS system that the campus typically uses, Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, and they get access to the entire roster, and they invite them all to a Facebook chat. With this, though, there's always one person in every class, as we like to say, who doesn't get that invite. And KP, I'm sure you can attest to it. Nobody invites you to that Facebook group, right?
Yeah, I don't take it personally, but sometimes I do.
Yeah, and it really is it's not so much the problem that the professors is not likable. It really just boils down to not wanting to connect our personal lives with our academic lives through these social channels. And so the problem with that is that when the professor's not invited, they're typically the one person that can drive these academic conversations further than any student-only conversation can typically go. They're also the one person who could probably dial back these conversations if they go too far down the wrong path. Very important pieces of information are left out, or something critical to the education process. They're able to contribute to both sides of those conversations. And so despite the benefits of including the professors, we mentioned, they're not really invited because of that invasiveness into the personal life. And so, Facebook group is just that to students. It's theirs, and it's a place they can chat freely and, discuss class without any repercussions, at the administrative level of the class. And so I'd be curious that, what are your thoughts on those types of conversations, and would you want to be invited to them, right? So the evolutions here that, that are already happening in the classroom, one way or another, right? We have the way people are communicating is changing. We keep talking about that's a common theme in our webinars. And the student demographic is adapting far more quickly than others because we're the ones who grew up with the technology, right? We've been in these things for a decade now. And so it's really familiar to us, and it's, to me, it's ingrained in my being, my connection with technology and the extension of what it does for me. And so I've never really known, I guess I can think back to, early on when it was AOL and dial-up and, the interesting noises that it took to connect to the internet.
You remember that?
Yeah, but and even then, that was back when I was just learning about how to chat with my friends who were, in the house next door to me. And so we don't really know what it's like to be without that type of connection and without that type of access. Now, older demographics, like some professors, they can generally learn new technology that replaces old technology that they had learned when they were younger and, at a more adaptive age, so to speak. But I think leveraging the student learning initiatives that, are happening with or without their consent, and then obviously finding a way to incorporate those into that traditional instructor-led strategy, that creates the more collaborative, learning environment where both educators and students are contributing to, the learning process and designing the way that the classes are being conducted.
That's an excellent point, Ryan. Now time for questions. I'll start us off with this one. What types of back-end learning environments do you prefer, and what is the single best experience you've had utilizing these tools?
I think I really do prefer those social channels, even though they are kind of exclusive of the professor in general. Like when I was sick, one of the best ways for me to plug in, when I was spending my time in the hospital and not in class, was finding the students that I can connect with during the class, but that I could also, piggyback on when I wasn't able to attend. And so I was getting notes shared with me. I was getting, pictures of presentations that I wasn't able to see. They were forwarding me, the PowerPoints from the lectures. And so just having that mechanism to get instant access to information that I typically couldn't get unless I reached out to the professor, which you don't know how long it takes to get an email back. If they're not tech savvy with Blackboard, some of the information is not readily available, and you can just get it quicker through the back. We call it kind of like the information black market of the classroom. And I just really found usefulness in, the timeliness, the response time, the feedback loops, that you get access to the entire class. Now, if the professor was plugged into that, I think it would just be that much more better, because then you're bringing in expertise, and the person that's being paid to educate you is actually now involved in that part of that discussion as well.
Right.
So for UKP, I think a good starting point would be, one, how do you encourage the back-end learning in your classroom, or discourage, depending upon your teaching type? And then, are you actually part of any of your students' outside groups or communities? And if not, are you even attempting to bridge that gap, or what is your idea on facilitating those learning outcomes?
Well, I agree. I think that they're important, and like you said, they're going to happen. It's just, can you direct them, and how can you make them better? So for some of my classes, one of the channels that we've set up is Course Key, right? Being able to have that chat within the application where they're able to find some other resources and things, even during the classroom, has been helpful. Some other things that I see are Facebook groups that I've actually created in trying to make myself more available to the students, again, as we said, in the channels that they're already using. I think Twitter gets, it's hard for some people to follow along, whereas I think Facebook, and if you can keep things in, you have it in a closed group, then it just makes it a little bit more localized, right? Students are able to they know where they're supposed to go to find that kind of content, because everybody's agreed on what that channel is going to be. And as long as I'm not the expected professor coming in there, trying to treat it like it's my classroom, because sometimes it really, you can look at it two ways, right? You can look at it as an extension of your classroom in the literal sense or the figurative sense, right? In the literal sense, it's a group that I create and I'm going to manage like it, and I would have the same expectations in this group that was my classroom. At the same time, if you stay to it more in the figurative, that's an extension, is, if I can get a group of students that are continue the conversation outside of my classroom, and they don't want to have me around for that, that's just the student, the student lounge, I'm completely fine with that. I'm excited just that they've got a group that support themselves outside of the classroom, and that the purpose is to improve their performance. I think that's great.
And do you think that ties in informal learning back into the mix? Whereas, when we're kids and we're kind of playing outside, we tend to learn quite a bit from just the informal part of the day-to-day. Do you think that allows you to bring back in the informal part of the education that can typically be pretty impactful?
I think it's a way for students to reinforce the learning that is happening in the class with those individuals that perhaps need those micro lessons. Whether it's a reminder that something isn't right, or a reinforcement that something is right. They're able to share that data and experience it themselves, and through an application process, they continually reinforce what's the right way to do to perform a process, or to answer a problem, or to solve an equation.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's another end of our webinar. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for your submissions, and of course, an all-around interesting, important conversation for us to all have as higher education classroom continues to evolve. So now our 7th webinar in the series has come to an end, but the discussion continues.
That's right. And you can download our ebook at Creating Engagement in the Classroom to learn more about creating engagement in your classroom and how some of these strategies might be directly applicable to what you're doing in your lectures. And again, whether you're a teacher or a student, we encourage both of you to contribute to the conversation. We're actively trying to learn more about what's really happening out in these classes. You can add your comments to the blogs on our website at creatingengagementintheclassroom.org, and make sure to follow the conversation on social media using the hashtag creatingengagement.
Thanks everyone for joining our conversation today, and please consider sharing this with your fellow educators and students so they can share their expertise, their opinions, and their experiences as well. Thanks everyone.
Creating Engagement in the Classroom, Understanding the Challenges of the Modern Day Learning Environment is written by Kevin Popovic and Ryan Vanshur.
To learn more about creating engagement in your classroom, visit creatingengagementintheclassroom.org or follow hashtag creatingengagement.